Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're going to a new frontier, the final frontier of mobile connectivity, even space. We're going to dive deep into the world of AST SpaceMobile, and this company is aiming to build a cellular broadband network, not on Earth, but in space. And the kicker is, you wouldn't even need any special equipment to connect, just your good old smartphone.
What's fascinating here is this isn't some far-off fantasy. They've already launched test satellites and made direct rev calls. They've even hit impressive data speeds to unmodified smartphones, and they're partnering with some of the biggest mobile carriers on the planet.
It's incredible to think that we might be on the cusp of truly global mobile connectivity. Truly global, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to guide our deep dive, we've got AST SpaceMobile's own quarterly report, their Form 10Q filed with the SEC just last week. This report, along with its exhibits, gives us an inside look at their financials, their ambitious roadmap, and the hurdles they're facing.
This report is a gold mine of information. It lets us peek behind the curtain and understand not just the technology, but also the business and legal realities of building a space-based cellular network. So, are you ready to unpack this with us?
Absolutely. Let's start with the company's journey. AST SpaceMobile has hit some major milestones, beginning with their test satellite, BlueWalker 3, back in 2022.
BlueWalker 3 was pivotal. It proved the core concept was viable. They made direct voice calls from space to unmodified smartphones and hit 4G and even 5G data speeds. It was a validation of their technology, a signal to the world that they were serious.
Okay, but a test satellite is one thing. How have they progressed from testing to actually building this network?
Well, in September of this year, they launched their first-generation commercial satellites. These are called Block 1 satellites, and they are now operational. This was a huge leap from a test satellite to a working part of their network.
That's an incredible achievement. And it sounds like they're just getting started. Their roadmap outlines plans to launch up to 60 more advanced Block 2 satellites over the next 2 years, with the first one slated to be sent to the launch provider by spring of next year.
Yes, and the scale of their ambition is really striking. They aren't aiming for spotty coverage. They want to provide continuous service in key global markets, and that requires a constellation of satellites working together seamlessly.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, money. Launching all these satellites can't be cheap. What's AST SpaceMobile's financial situation like?
As of September 30th, they had over $518 million in cash on hand, which sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah.
But building and launching a network of this scale requires deep pockets.
So are they good to go, or will they need to raise more funds? And how are they getting the money in the first place?
They're actively fundraising, in fact. They've estimated they need to raise an additional $120 to $170 million just to meet their current working capital needs. This includes debt repayments, operating expenses, and the costs of designing, assembling, and launching those 20 Block 2 satellites.
And to be clear, that's just for the initial 20. The full constellation will likely need a lot more funding.
Right.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. They've managed to attract significant investments from some major players. Vodafone, AT&T, Google, Verizon. These aren't companies that throw money around lightly.
That's a really impressive list of backers.
Yeah.
It seems like these industry giants see the potential in what AST SpaceMobile is trying to do. But it's not all smooth sailing, is it? They've faced some legal challenges along the way.
Yeah, they've had class action lawsuits filed against them, both in federal court and in Delaware. While those lawsuits have been voluntarily dismissed, it highlights the scrutiny a company like this faces when attempting something this revolutionary. It makes sense that when you're pushing the boundaries of technology and business, you're going to encounter some bumps along the way. What are some of the other challenges they've acknowledged in their report?
Well, like many companies today, they cite macroeconomic conditions as a potential risk. This means things like inflation and supply chain issues could impact their plans, particularly as they're building complex hardware.
And of course, there's the whole regulatory maze to navigate. Space is getting more crowded.
Yeah.
And getting approval to operate a network of this scale in multiple countries, it's a massive undertaking.
Absolutely. They need to secure approvals in each market they intend to operate in. And those regulatory hurdles are a significant factor.
Plus, there's the competition. Satellite internet is a hot area right now. What are some of the other companies AST SpaceMobile is up against?
Competition is definitely fierce. There are both established players and ambitious startups investing heavily in satellite internet constellations. So AST SpaceMobile needs to prove that its technology not only works, but offers a clear advantage over the alternatives.
So to stay ahead of the pack, AST SpaceMobile is using some interesting financial strategies. It seems like they're playing the equity game to fuel their growth, right?
They are. They're utilizing equity programs,
Mm-hmm.
including a $400 million equity distribution agreement. And they've been leveraging warrant exercises to raise capital. It's quite a sophisticated approach.
For those of us who aren't financial wizards, could you break down what an equity distribution agreement is and how it helps them?
Imagine you have a piggy bank you can dip into whenever you need cash. That's essentially what this agreement allows them to do. They can sell shares of their stock directly into the market over time, rather than doing a big one-time offering. It gives them flexibility in managing their finances.
That makes sense. So it's like a steady stream of funding they can access as needed. But you also mentioned warrants earlier. How do those fit into the picture?
Warrants are essentially like golden tickets. They give the holder the right to buy AST SpaceMobile stock at a certain price in the future. The company has used these to incentivize early investors and raise capital. When these warrants are exercised, it brings in more cash.
Ah, so those warrants are directly tied to their fundraising efforts. It seems like they're exploring different avenues to get the money they need for this ambitious project.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that they're not just betting on phone services for revenue. They're looking at applications beyond connecting individuals.
Right. That's right. They're exploring government applications for their technology, which could be a lucrative revenue stream. Imagine providing communication for disaster relief efforts, military operations, or even scientific research in remote locations. Their technology could be invaluable in these situations.
So they're diversifying their revenue streams and not putting all their eggs in one basket. It sounds like they've got a solid plan. But of course, it's a risky venture.
It is. They're pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah.
And that comes with inherent risks. But the potential rewards are enormous.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. And we have a good understanding of AST SpaceMobile's journey so far, their financial situation, and the challenges they face. Now let's shift gears and dive deeper into the specifics of their technology. How does this direct-to-phone connection from space actually work?
At the core of their system are their BlueBird satellites. And these satellites are equipped with massive phased array antennas.
Okay, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. Could you explain what a phased array antenna is in a way that even I can understand?
Of course, imagine a bunch of smaller antennas all working together, like a synchronized dance team, to create a much larger, more powerful antenna. That's the basic idea behind a phased array antenna.
So it's like teamwork for antennas. I like that analogy. But there are other companies launching satellites for internet access, right? What makes AST SpaceMobile's approach unique?
Here's the key difference. Most other satellite internet providers require specialized equipment on the ground to connect to their network. You need a satellite dish or a special modem. AST SpaceMobile is aiming to bypass all of that.
So with their system, you could theoretically use your current smartphone to connect to the internet from literally anywhere in the world. Imagine, you could be calling your friend from the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and it's all thanks to a satellite overhead.
That's the vision they're working towards.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about. But let's be realistic. There are other companies out there trying to do similar things. What are some of the competitors AST SpaceMobile is facing, and how do they stack up?
That's a great question, and it's something we should definitely explore further. But first, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll delve into the competitive landscape and see how AST SpaceMobile measures up. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the competitive landscape AST SpaceMobile is navigating. It's a crowded field with some big names vying for dominance in the satellite internet space.
Yeah, competition is fierce. You've got established players like SpaceX with its Starlink network and Amazon with Project Kuiper, and then there are other companies like OneWeb and Telesat also building out their own satellite constellations. It's a real race to the stars.
It is. Each company has its own approach, its own strengths and weaknesses. So where does AST SpaceMobile fit into all of this?
That's the million-dollar question. What are their key advantages, and how are they positioning themselves to stand out from the crowd?
Their direct-to-phone technology is their biggest differentiator, as we've discussed. While their competitors focus on providing broadband internet access, primarily targeting homes and businesses, AST SpaceMobile is going for something much more ambitious, connecting standard smartphones directly to their satellites.
That's a game changer if they can pull it off. Imagine no more scrambling for Wi-Fi when you're traveling or worrying about dead zones in remote areas. Your phone would essentially become a satellite phone with global coverage.
Exactly. That's the promise they're offering. And it's a compelling one, especially for mobile network operators who are constantly looking for ways to expand their coverage and offer better service to their customers.
It seems like a no-brainer for mobile carriers to partner with them then, and they have some impressive partnerships in place already, right?
They do. We mentioned Vodafone, AT&T, and Verizon earlier. These partnerships are crucial for AST SpaceMobile because they provide access to a massive existing customer base and valuable infrastructure.
So instead of having to build their own network of cell towers and convince individual customers to sign up, they can leverage the mobile carrier's existing networks and relationships.
Precisely. They're essentially integrating their space-based network with terrestrial mobile networks, creating a hybrid system that could offer truly ubiquitous connectivity.
That's a brilliant strategy. It allows them to focus on their core competency, which is building and operating the space-based network, while leaving the complexities of customer acquisition and ground-based infrastructure to their partners.
Exactly. And for the mobile carriers, it's a way to offer their customers a significant upgrade without having to invest heavily in their own satellite infrastructure.
It's a win-win situation. But I'm curious, are these partnerships exclusive? Could AST SpaceMobile partner with other mobile carriers in the future?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. Their agreements with Vodafone, AT&T, and Verizon are not exclusive, meaning they are free to partner with other mobile network operators globally.
That makes sense. It would be foolish to limit themselves to just a handful of partners when there's so much potential for growth worldwide.
Exactly. Their goal is to create a truly global network, and that means working with as many partners as possible.
This all sounds very promising, but we need to remember that this is still a very early stage for the company. They've launched a few satellites, they've got some partnerships in place, but they're still burning cash to reach that future. But assuming they DO succeed, let's imagine the world AST SpaceMobile is trying to build.
Okay, let's step into that future for a moment.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a world where your smartphone is no longer limited by terrestrial cell towers. You could be hiking in the Himalayas, sailing across the Pacific, or exploring the Amazon rainforest, and you'd still be able to make calls, send texts, and access the internet, all with your regular phone.
It's like taking the power of the internet and making it truly mobile, accessible from anywhere on the planet.
Exactly. And it's not just about convenience. Think about the impact on emergency response, disaster relief, remote healthcare, and education. The possibilities are endless.
It's really exciting to think about the potential positive impact this could have on so many lives. But with any new technology, there are also potential risks and challenges, right?
Absolutely. There are concerns about data privacy and security, the potential for increased surveillance, and the environmental impact of launching so many satellites. And then there's the issue of affordability. Will this service be accessible to everyone, or will it only benefit those who can already afford it? These are all important questions that we need to consider.
Those are definitely some big questions. But before we dive deeper into those broader implications, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, the financial side of things. In part one, we talked about AST SpaceMobile's fundraising efforts and the fact that they're still burning cash.
Right. Remember, they're aiming to raise an additional $120 to $170 million on top of what they already have. But even that might not be enough to reach their ultimate goal of building a full constellation of satellites.
And they're relying heavily on equity financing, selling shares of their stock to raise capital. But isn't that a bit risky considering the volatility of the stock market? I mean, what happens if their stock price takes a tumble?
That's a valid concern. Reliance on equity financing does make them vulnerable to market fluctuations. If investor sentiment turns negative, it could become more difficult and expensive for them to raise the funds they need.
That's a lot of money they need to raise. Are you confident they can actually pull this off, given the competition and the potential for market ups and downs?
It's certainly a challenge, but they've demonstrated an ability to attract significant investments from major players. And their partnerships with mobile carriers give them a distinct advantage in terms of market access and distribution.
Okay, so they have a solid plan and some powerful backers. But let's talk about the nuts and bolts of their business. How do they actually plan to make money from this? They haven't started generating revenue from their commercial cellular service yet, right?
That's correct. They're still in the pre-revenue stage for their core business. But they did generate $1.1 million in revenue for the 3 months ended September 30, 2024, and $2.5 million for the 9 months ended on the same date.
Wait, so where's that revenue coming from if it's not from phone service?
That revenue is actually from a U.S. government contract, which is interesting. It suggests they're already exploring alternative revenue streams and not putting all their eggs in the consumer mobile market basket.
That's a smart move, especially given the uncertainties of building a completely new market.
Agreed. It shows they're thinking strategically about their business model, but their long-term success will ultimately depend on their ability to attract millions of paying subscribers for their cellular service.
And then that brings us back to the partnerships with mobile carriers.
Right. Those partnerships are crucial not just for expanding their reach, but also for generating revenue. The idea is that mobile carriers will offer AST SpaceMobile Service as part of their existing plans or as an add-on, and then they'll share the revenue.
So it's like a wholesale model where AST SpaceMobile provides the space-based network and the mobile carriers handle the retail side of things, billing and customer service.
Exactly. It's a model that makes sense for both parties.
Okay, so that's the revenue side. But what about expenses? We talked about their fundraising efforts, but they're also spending a lot of money to get this off the ground.
They are. Their Form 10Q provides a detailed breakdown of their expenses. And it's not surprising to see that their biggest expense category is engineering services. For the 3 months ended September 30, 2024, they spent $21.8 million on engineering services, and that number was $62.5 million for the 9 months ended on the same date.
Wow, that's a lot of engineering. I guess it takes a lot of brain power to build a space-based cellular network.
It does. A lot of that goes towards things like payroll and employee-related costs for their engineers, as well as the costs of running their assembly, integration, and testing facilities. They have a large facility in Texas where they do the final assembly and testing of their satellites.
It sounds like a massive operation. What are some of their other major expenses?
General and administrative costs are another significant chunk. This covers things like salaries for non-engineering staff, legal fees, and marketing expenses.
Those are essential costs for running any business, really. Anything else that stands out in their expenses?
Research and development is another area where they're investing heavily, which makes sense given the complexity of their technology and the need to stay ahead of the competition. They're constantly innovating and improving their technology. This includes developing their ASIC chip, a specialized chip designed specifically for their satellites. They hit a key milestone in this development with the tape-out, the final pre-production step.
Wow, so even though they've already launched satellites, they're still investing heavily in research and development. That shows they're committed to pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Absolutely. They seem to understand that innovation is key to their long-term success.
Okay, so they're spending a lot of money on engineering, general operations, and research and development. Makes sense. But is all this spending sustainable? Are they on track to become profitable?
That's the big question, and the answer isn't clear-cut. They're clearly in growth mode right now, and it's going to take time for their commercial service to generate enough revenue to cover their costs.
So it's a bit of a wait-and-see game at this point. We need to keep an eye on their financial performance in the coming quarters to see if they're making progress towards profitability.
Agreed. Their ability to manage their expenses, attract subscribers, and generate revenue will be key factors in determining their long-term success.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the competitive landscape, their partnerships, their revenue model, their expenses, and the risks and opportunities they face. But there's one more crucial aspect we need to address: the regulatory landscape.
Right. Navigating the complex world of regulations is arguably just as important as the technology itself. So let's turn our attention to the regulatory hurdles AST SpaceMobile needs to clear and what they mean for the company's future.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, as we've been talking about AST SpaceMobile's technology and their business strategy, I keep thinking about all the ways this could change things, not just for the company, but for all of us.
Yeah, it's truly a paradigm shift we're talking about here. Imagine a world where your mobile phone is no longer tethered to Earth. You're no longer at the mercy of spotty cell service.
Oh.
Or limited by geographic location. You could be in the middle of the ocean, deep in a remote forest, or even on top of Mount Everest, and you'd still have access to the same connectivity you enjoy at home.
That's a powerful image. It would truly level the playing field in terms of access to information and communication, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Think about the potential for education, healthcare, and economic development, especially in underserved communities in developing nations. Students could access online learning resources, doctors could consult with specialists remotely, and entrepreneurs could connect with global markets.
So for people in remote areas, this could be life-changing. It could open up opportunities that were previously unimaginable.
Yeah, and it could also revolutionize disaster response. Imagine being able to communicate and coordinate relief efforts in the immediate aftermath of an earthquake or a hurricane, even if traditional communication infrastructure has been wiped out.
It's incredible to think about the potential positive impact. But let's be honest, there are always two sides to every coin. What about the potential downsides? What should we be cautious about as this technology develops?
You're right. There are valid concerns that need to be addressed. One of the biggest is data privacy and security. With more people connected, there's more data being generated, and we need to ensure that data is protected from misuse and exploitation.
So it's not just about building the technology, it's about building it responsibly and with safeguards in place.
Exactly. And then there are the environmental considerations. Launching and operating a constellation of satellites has an environmental impact.
Yeah.
And we need to think about ways to mitigate that impact.
It's about finding a balance between technological advancement and environmental sustainability.
Right. And we also need to be mindful of the potential for increased surveillance. With a network that can track mobile phones anywhere on the planet, there's a risk that this technology could be used for purposes that infringe on individual liberties.
That's a critical point. We need to ensure that this technology is used for good and not for purposes that could harm or oppress people.
And then there's the question of affordability. Will this service be priced in a way that makes it accessible to everyone? Or will it only be available to those who can afford it, further widening the digital divide?
Digital equity is crucial. We don't want to create a world where only the privileged few have access to this transformative technology.
Exactly. These are complex issues that need to be carefully considered and addressed as this technology unfolds.
So while the potential benefits of AST SpaceMobile's vision are vast, it's not a simple solution to global connectivity. There are ethical, social, and economic implications that we need to grapple with.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that technology is never neutral. It's shaped by the choices we make, the values we prioritize, and the regulations we put in place.
This brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. As we've explored today, AST SpaceMobile is a company with bold ambitions, groundbreaking technology, and the potential to reshape global connectivity as we know it. But they also face significant challenges, not just technological, but also financial, regulatory, and ethical. So here's what we want you to consider. If AST SpaceMobile, or any other company for that matter, succeeds in creating a truly global space-based mobile network, what will that mean for you? How will you use it? What opportunities will it unlock? And what potential downsides will you be watching out for? We encourage you to ponder these questions and engage in the conversation about the future of connectivity.
It's a future that's being shaped right now, and your voice and your perspective matter.
That's it for this deep dive into the world of AST SpaceMobile. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world around us.